All right, in this lecture, I want to go through just some extra things you can add to an animation just to make it a bit fancier. So we're going to start with this square here. And you can see it comes in and just falls. But what we kind of need is if we had maybe a little animation on here of like some motion trails or something apart from motion blur. So if I turn on motion blur here and here, we definitely feel a little bit more, but kind of like a stylized little line that kind of follows it too would be neat to have on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my pen tool. I'm going to go to a no shape here, and I'm just going to draw what I think that line should look like. So something like this, and that's a bit big, so I'm going to really shrink it down into a better size. And I'll get rid of the stroke, and I'll just turn on the fill. Maybe I'll make it a bit brighter. There we go. I'm just tweaking kind of the shape a bit. Okay, so what I want to do is animate it so that this shape basically starts from nothing, it gets really long, and then like this, and then goes back to nothing. So it's kind of like it's moving. So I'm going to go into the shape node. I'm going to go to the shape area, and under path, that's where I'm going to animate. So I'm going to rewind it to the beginning. I'm going to set the middle of this first. Okay, now it doesn't matter where I set this because I'll adjust my keyframes, but let's say there. I'll set a keyframe here. That's what I want it to look like in the middle. At the beginning of this, I want all of these points to be basically at the front of it. So I'm going to deselect and then grab back on my contents and then drag all of these points here. Now what that should do is it should expand it like that. And then when I go to the end of the animation, I want to just basically put all these points back in here. Okay, that way it looks like it's actually like moving. So it's going to go like that. Okay, so that looks pretty cool. Now what I want to do is I want to attach it to this shape so that it moves with it. Okay, so let's say that I wanted this to move exactly with this shape at the bottom here. I can do what's called parenting. And when I'm in the right mode here, I can see these little pick whips. That's what those are. And I basically want to attach this to that. Okay. But I don't want rotation to follow it. I just want position. So you can actually open up position, and I can basically say that I want this position to follow that position. So all I have to do is just drag this onto that, and then click off, and now the positions will follow each other. Okay. Now I may want to offset this some, so let's click on this and hit A, and then I can just use my anchor point as a way to offset this. So maybe it's like in the actual corner of the shape. Maybe a bit forward too, so let's go that way. Okay, so let's zoom out. Let's click off, let's see what it looks like. So you can see it definitely adds just a little bit of extra motion on top of it. It feels like we have just a little bit more movement to it. Now I can take this shape and duplicate it, and then just hit that A for anchor point again, and maybe make another one, let's say down here at the bottom. There we go. So now we have two of these things, these little trails happening. Now it looks kind of weird that they're both happening at the same time. So if I just go into each one of these, I could look at the keyframes, I could adjust where the keyframes are, but realistically we shouldn't have anything here. If there's no animation here, like nothing's happening, then these both should be cut. So I'm just going to grab both of those and hit Alt and then left bracket. Same thing on the end. If there's no animation happening after this and there's not even visible, I'm going to Alt right bracket that. Okay, so now that I have this, I can just offset this. I'm just going to scoot this like 2 frames over, rewind to the beginning, and then hit play. And you'll see now it's a little bit offset. One happens before the other one. And it just makes it feel a little bit more realistic, just adding in these kinds of things here. All right, another little thing that I can do to this, maybe when it hits the ground, there's more of an impact, like a little resonating waveform, okay? Now for that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into a new composition, because this is something I might wanna use over and over again. So I'm just gonna make this 500 by 500 pixels, same frame rate as before, and 1 second should be plenty. So I'll just hit 1 second. So I'm gonna go into this, and I'm gonna go to ellipse, and I'm gonna double click. And that makes a perfect circle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to animate the scale of this. So I'm going to go to the beginning and set that to 0. There we go. Let's say, oops. Let me start my keyframes. I'll go up to, let's say, 10. I'll crank this up to 100. And then I'll adjust my keyframes by adding in my easy ease. So I'll hit F9, and then I'll grab my curves, and let's say the speed's going to be at the front of this. All right. And then let's squeeze these in a little bit further. There we go. Now what I want to do is I want to create more of a line work that would happen here, and it would just kind of like a bubble, like bursting. So I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to hit my switches and modes, and I'm going to tell the bottom layer to track matte the one above it. So alpha matte, or sorry, alpha inverted matte that. And then what I'm going to do is take that top one and just offset it like 2 frames. Maybe 1 frame, we'll see. Nope, I think 2 frames is perfect. So you can see now how we get this like cut here where it's like a bubble is happening. Now we do get, it's very subtle, but there is a line happening around here. I'm just going to click on that top layer, go to the keyframe, and maybe just set this to 101. Okay, it's just both lines are on the exact same spot, so it's cutting it off, or it's overlapping, so we're seeing it, so that takes care of that. Okay, now if I only want part of this, that'll happen in the other composition. So I'm going to jump back to comp 1, and I'll go to my project, and I'm going to rename this. So this comp 2 will be my bubble. And then comp 2 will be my main comp. Okay. So now I'm going to take my bubble and just drop it into here. Oops. I named the wrong thing. Let's try that again. This is main comp. And this is bubble. There we go. So now let's try it again. Drop bubble into here. And you'll see that this comes in at the entire length. Jump back to bubble. I'll grab the layers and hit U, and you'll see that it ends right there. There's no other animation happening inside here after this. So I'm going to hit N to set the end of my work area. I'll even drag it back 1 just to make sure it's right on it. And then go to Composition, Trim. And now that fits exactly where our animation is happening. I'm also going to go into here and turn on my motion blurs. That way that comes over into the other composition. Back to here, you'll see now this is shorter, and then I can line this up. Right when this hits the ground, boom, that's when I want that bubble to happen. So I'm going to drag the bubble in. I'm going to hit S to scale it. I'm going to shrink it down. And then I just simply move it where I want that bubble to happen. Now, like I said, if I don't want this to happen on the entire thing, all I have to do now is just go to my shapes here and just cut out, let's say, half of it. Okay. So let's say I don't want this part. So I'm going to cut that out, and I'll just say invert the mask. And then maybe we'll do a little feathering on it. Go. And then now let's take a look and see what that looks like. So now you see it's a little bit more impactful as to how that comes in and pops a little bit. You could also go through, instead of it being just like a perfect, cut in that corner, I could go back to here and let's say draw in another shape like this. Instead of invert, I'm just going to turn that off, and then just turn this to subtract. Then turn this one to subtract also. And then just double click it, and I can rotate that around. And then maybe a little feather on there. I'm not, you know, you can play with this for a while, but so now you see how we have like a little cut that happens in the center of that. Okay, so that's a very simple way just to add just a little bit of extra stuff to your animation. I'm do the same thing on, let's say, this letter S here. So I have this letter S, and it's animated to write in. Let me turn off the other stuff so we don't see that. Okay, and the way I did that was I used the layer above it. I traced out where I wanted that to animate, and then I used that trim path I showed in another video to animate that in there, and then I used a track mat. Okay, so that part's all the same. Okay, so it just animates the letter S getting written. And then what I can do is, using that same trim path, I created these two other layers. And I'll pick different colors just so you can see that. Oops. That they match. There we go. Okay, just the one layer. So you can see here how it comes in and wraps around. So it's kind of like adding to that animation. So it's not just the letter S. So I have these extra little pieces on there that are also animating. And you can do this for any number of strokes, however you want to set it up. But I just went to the pen tool, and I just started here and said, this is where I want this to go. Turn the fill off. Turn the stroke up, try to get it to match, as best I can, the size of that, the direction of that. And then I just went into my contents and did a trim path. And then the way that it's animated, I just ignore the animation on this, but I want this to basically animate from this point outward. So I'm going to use the end point. Okay, so that's what I'm going to animate, is this one coming out. So I'm going to say start it here at nothing, scoot up a little bit, go all the way to the end. Now at this point I also want the other end to start coming in, so that's going to be the start. So I'm going to click the diamond for start, scoot up a little bit here, and then animate the start moving along. So now what I get is the end animating right there, and then when the end is done, then it animates the start, and so then we get that line happening. And then all I have to do now is, this is the end of that animation, I alt click it, the bracket to close it. Oops. In this case I don't need to do any easy ease on it. I could adjust some of the speed, but I'm simply just going to drag this down to where the S is. Oops, too far down. And then I'm just going to line it up with where I want that to come in. So this is where about it comes in. I'm going to drag this over, and then just playing with the layers position, make sure that it looks like it's flowing. It's a little bit slow. It's like this goes fast and then that goes slow for some reason. So I'll hit U. I'll grab these, drag it back, grab this one, drag it back. There we go. So it's quicker. I'll drag it even closer. There we go. And then once we start putting motion blur on these things, it'll start to feel a little bit more fluid. Now this is another reason that you want to make sure that you have your layers cropped. So the animation for this actually stops right here, but you'll see there's a little bit of a piece hanging out. And the reason for that is just because of how the motion blur is calculating, it still thinks that there's a part of that animation. So I'm just going to drag this in so it literally stops right at the end of that. And you'll see it's a nice little touch that, just on the top of it, as opposed to just having just the S there, we get these nice little swoops that are happening too. And I could have them also come down. So as I'm drawing the S, as it comes up here, I could have a swoop, and then as it comes down here, I could have a swoop, and as it comes over here, I could do it, and it comes down there, I could do it too. This kind of technique is used all over the place for these kinds of animations. And they're just nice little ways to be able to add a little animation on top of your animation just to make it kind of flow and be a little bit more appealing.